All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you also very much for joining us today. This is very exciting to be having this conversation. Four amazing ladies. For those who are new here to this show, this is Weddy Guru Live. We have conversations with wedding experts, like the three ladies here with me, to guide you who is planning a wedding on things that you should start thinking about to make your wedding planning process smooth and stress-free so that you can actually get to enjoy the day of your wedding. Without further ado, please allow me to formally introduce the ladies who are here, beginning with my far right. If you could tell us your name, the organization that you are representing, and perhaps a little bit more about the same. Dorothy.
Thank you, Kimari, for having us. Of course, it is indeed a great pleasure to be here. My name is Dorothy Kimwili. I work for House of Dotty. We are primarily wedding and event planners and coordinators. But of course, we also do wedding supplies and many other things wedding related. It's another discussion altogether, another time about why it's important to have a wedding planner. I'm also a wife. I do this with my husband, Alfred, and a mother of two daughters, Jasmine and Kanya, and, a sister, a friend, and of course, a child of God.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dorothy. Agnes?
Happy, first of all, to be here. Thank you, Kimari, for this opportunity. Great to be amongst these very talented weddings and event providers. My name is Agnes Mwangi. I run a catering firm called Pot Delight. We specialize in a food and beverage service for all your events, be it your weddings, corporate events, small home parties. We provide for you a solution for your catering needs. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Agnes. And last but certainly not least.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to have such conversations with my sisters in the industry. I am Shiro Magira from Magnolia Event Planners. We are passionate for all things beautiful. We do decor, we do planning, and above all, we are passionate about happily ever after. So this is where it starts. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. By the way, you should follow each one of them on Instagram. I hope I get your Instagram handles correct. That's house_of_Dotty. That's for House of Dotty. And there's Pots_Delight.
Yes.
Correct. And then there's Magnolia Event Planners Kenya. So please follow them. You can also follow us at Weddy Guru on Instagram. My name is Kimari Maina. I do many things in the wedding space, but today I wear the hat of hosting this show. And it's such a joy to have these guys here. I would love to mention those who have supported us in making sure that this show is perfect. First and foremost, the ladies are looking amazing, and that is courtesy of Jedida Waithera. Well, I call her Waithera. Remind me your Instagram handle. TJ Makeup Studios. That's at TJ Makeup Studios. Please follow them on Instagram and see their work. And kwanza when they do close-ups on, for example, Dorothy, who sat there for what was it, for 45 minutes? If you are a bride, you probably want a simple but beautiful look like the one Dorothy has. So please check them out on the Instagram handle. This entire live stream is courtesy of 61. Hey, atanipiga mbaya nikisema studios. It's 61, and that is the Instagram handle at 61 Kenya. Check them out. They offer photo and video services, photography, and cinematography services. So please check them out and follow them. And if you're looking for a perfect live stream like this, be sure to reach out to them. And of course, Teddy Wandera has been running the sound and the quality of sound in this show and even the previous one. I will leave his contacts here below. If you're a corporate company and you're looking for someone to help manage the sound at your event, feel free to reach out to him. Lastly, but not least, we have our host here today, and that is Elysian Resort. We're going to be giving you a little bit more details about Elysian in the middle of the show, but for now, allow me to get back to the ladies and ask a few questions. We're here to discuss specifically numbers, because numbers is such a it can be a headache. When you're planning your wedding, you need to figure out how to manage your numbers for your wedding so that, for example, guests get to be served their food and get to enjoy the meal as opposed to portioning it, which is what some caterers may do to make sure everybody gets food. I'm going to begin with you, Dorothy. What should, or how does one arrive at a specific number to host at their wedding? How would you advise a couple to arrive at, our wedding shall have 300 people, not 150, for example, Dorothy?
Okay, so that's usually a very tricky question. There's no right answer to that. Reason being, there's so many dynamics that determine the size of wedding you want. For example, like as a planner, when I meet the client the first time, of course, one of the first things we discuss is numbers. So I always ask the client, how have you come up with these numbers? Because most of the time the client already comes to you with like, I have 500. So of course I ask, how have you arrived at these numbers? Did you do a guest list? Is it because of what your brother or your sister or your cousin did? How did you arrive at these numbers? So with that in mind, I always say it's always good initially, even before you even start any discussion, to know the exact numbers that you're coming up with, because unfortunately, or I don't know if I can say unfortunately, budgets are determined by numbers. Be it food, be it decor, be it setup, all that is determined by number. Even venue, because some venues don't take 500 people, they can only take 200 people and things like that. Even, for example, if you want to do a destination wedding and things like that, these are actually determined by numbers. So that is the first step when you decide to get married. Initially, those are the first conversations you should have with, as a couple, with the family and everybody, just so that you're aligned with numbers and not just come up with your head. You should actually sit down if possible and write number, like literally write the whole guest list.
So what you're saying is that, and I'd like to hear from Shiro Agi on the same. So what you're saying is that I should begin by writing my name, Kimari Maina, number 1. Number 2, Lynette Hisa, my wife. Number 3, so forth and so on, up until I get a full list. I know a lot of people. So at what point do I stop? Or how would you advise, Dorothy, a couple, to stop at 50, for example?
So I always say it's not good to bury your head under the sand like an ostrich. It's good to be realistic, because if you've planned for 50 people and then 6 months down the line, your parents are giving you another 100 people, 200 people. And if I can just give you a short story, Kimari, on this, there's a time I remember we went to Safari Park for a site visit. Am I allowed to say?
Yes.
Am I allowed to say? Are they paying you?
Well,
So we went to Safari Park for a site visit. And most hotels charge package. I always say, don't say foodies. It's just a package because it includes venue and so many other things that is included in a hotel package. So we went to Safari Park and we find a Mercedes parked with a ribbon, and that was on a Monday. So, the nice events lady there, I asked her, oh, somebody was given a gift. And she says, wow, there's a story behind this, because these people had planned for 300 people, and then 600 people showed up, and they don't have money for 300 people extra. Because say, I'm just giving a random figure, say it's 2,000 per person, and 300 extra people show up, that's literally 600K, which most of the time probably the client will not have. So they had to leave the Mercedes as collateral as they were trying to figure out how, and that is a Mercedes they got as a gift. So they had to leave that Mercedes as a collateral so that Safari Park could hold on to it until they were able to offset the balance. So it is, I know it sounds tedious, but it is so important to actually write Dorothy, Alfred, sister, is the sister married? Okay, +1. Is literally, it is so important to that. It sounds like a lot of work and it sounds hectic, but if you don't do that, you will be working with an assumption. I know some people just do like, it's okay, free for all, even if 2,000 people come. Either way, I think you should still know sort of have an idea of what the numbers are. Because even if you're like, leave it open, what are you planning for? 500, 1,000? So what are you planning for? So either way, you really need to, I know it seems like a lot of work, but at least when you write, you kind of have a ballpark figure, and which gives you like a 10% or something extra just in case.
All right. Thank you. Agi, Shiro, would you like to chime in on the same?
no, I just want to say exactly what she said. It's good to at least have a good estimate.
Closer.
Have a good estimate on the family dynamics, especially if you know you have a big family. Estimate, okay, maybe writing might be tedious, but estimate that we know from this family you have 50, 60, because yeah, it tends to pull the wedding budget down the more people you have, and it's good to have that cleared right from the beginning so that everything else runs smoothly.
Okay. Agi, there was a project we did. Oh, by the way, this is shameless plug. It's called Ask the Weddy Guru. It's every Wednesday in the morning. And when we did ours, you mentioned traditional events as being a litmus test about numbers. Talk to us about that.
So basically what happens is, as couples plan their weddings, first of all, a lot of people don't maybe have their starting point. So they may have gone to somebody else's wedding and seen, oh, okay, this is happening, this is good, we're going to have a wedding. And they start in some crowd of sorts. So at that time, they might not even know the numbers they expect for their weddings. But the first, the way events are run, especially in the African setting, is you first go to the girl's home for a visit, and you go to the guy's home at the end of your pre-plans. So those events that you go to the families, will tell you or can give you an indication of how many people you are likely to get from the families. For example, I'm from Kirinyaga. So my husband or fiancé comes to Kirinyaga. And I said, okay, we are going to expect 50 or 100 guests, but we didn't even sit down to write the list. We end up with 400 people. And this is not taking into account the visitors that have come in. That already is an indication that either my family is popular there, out there, or large. So basically, this can start giving us indications of the sizes of families to expect. I've seen some couples taking events like gurarios back to the village so that they limit the number of guests they're going to invite, especially to Nairobi events. But now from that, they can polish on their plans because of what their experiences has been from their previous traditional events. Yes.
Fantastic. I think what I'm hearing overall is just sit down and start writing the numbers.
Yes.
Count every single person who would feel otherwise if they were not invited for your wedding. But then now comes the second question, and I know I'm going off script here a little bit. Cost per guest. Because I think then, if we have to start writing down numbers, so fun fact, my wedding had 1,000 people. I did not have the wisdom to start writing down names for anyone who's coming, of the people who are going to be coming to my wedding. But the truth is that every single person who attended the wedding had a cost. And that cost, like you had said, numbers, like even you had said, numbers way down on budget. So maybe you could, Shiro, guide us a little bit. How do you calculate the cost per individual coming? That way, as I add a name, I know that I'm going to be spending X amount of money for each name that I write. Shiro.
So another way to, I guess, come up with these numbers is to know that in your bank account, you have X amount of Kenya shillings. For this case, we'll say 100,000. So, and if you do your homework, you get to know how much a caterer charges, how much cake per kg, you know what the average costs are, and you do a tentative estimate, you can see how far your 100,000 will take you. So that could also help you know whether we like it or not, down to 100 guests, or if you're able to bring it down to 1,000 per person. So ideally, in every event, for every chair that is being sat on, for every table, table linen, the flour, if it's 10 people per table, if that cost was 2,000, is divided by 10, it means there's 200 shillings per person. For every plate that they eat, you add to that. For the cake, because the cake is the same, the size of the tent, so the more the people, the more the surface area, yes. Right. So you actually sit down and see, you know what, it's going to cost us, maybe the wedding that we want would cost us 10,000 per person, but we only have 200,000. So therefore, this will help us bring our numbers down. or increase our numbers if you have more budget. Yeah.
Okay.
Did I answer you?
Yes, you did. I'm curious though. So, are there any other? No. Before we go into any other elements that weigh in on the budget, therefore the numbers, Agi, maybe you could take us through catering versus numbers. What should couples consider when thinking about catering versus numbers? I don't know if the question is clear.
I think so.
Okay.
When a couple is thinking of what they want to feed their guest, what they want their guests to enjoy, the first thing they should think about before budget, I always say this, before you think about budgets, think about what is your preference.
Experience.
In terms of what do you want your guests to experience? Are you feeding people for the sake of just feeding people so that there was food in your wedding? Or do you want people to enjoy an exotic meal? Do you want to feed everybody and feed everybody properly? Or do you want people to be sharing sodas or water? So first identify what you want to serve. That obviously then will give you, like, for example, when you identify that and you want to go to caterer A, you know their prices, or you have a rough idea, or you ask them for a proposal, then you know that if your numbers and your budget cannot match or work with this caterer, it's probably an opportunity to look for a cheaper caterer or upgrade your meal.
Or reduce the numbers.
Exactly, or reduce the numbers. Sometimes reducing numbers is a bit tricky because, unfortunately, a lot of people reduce numbers to fit the budget. Yeah? So you're working with your numbers and you don't want to water down or tone down or change your menu, but you're reducing the numbers on paper and it's not the actual thing on the ground. So what happens on the day? You have less meals, or you have chaos, and some people will even assume that if you come after 3 or after 4 and you haven't eaten, you're late. Yet they're hiding behind, they didn't want to pay the entire, they knew they were going to hit 600 guests, for example, but like, as far as the first 400 guests eat, the rest were late, So there are many ways that...
that is so risky.
It's very
That is so risky to say that, let's serve food by 2 be done, and if you come at 2:30, the caterer has already removed all the...
Where are you or something? But remember also where we are coming from. Okay, of course, the wedding industry has really, really grown. But if we take ourselves back to a couple of years, not many years back, traditionally, even out in the village, I don't know if it's still practiced now, how people were fed was very basic. Sufurias came to the ground, and actually people used to be put for
black
mokimo.
sufurias.
Yes. You're put for your mokimo. You're sitting on school desks. You're put for your mokimo on your palm. Who counted that? Who counted how many people have been fed on that mukimo? As far as the high table and the bridal party ate, and their food was put on their table with whatever chafing dishes, no one ever cared what the other people have eaten. But now we are very cautious about meals at modern weddings. You do not want to meet somebody a couple of months down the road and they're telling you, oh, we didn't eat at your wedding. You don't want to hear that. It's become such a big deal that one of the things you do not want to hear about your wedding was, I missed food at your wedding. So now with that, people are being a bit thorough, which now takes us back to the numbers, because then you have to get the right numbers to feed everybody.
So what I hear you've said is the first thing you need to do is determine the quality of food you would wish to serve your guests. What exactly is going to be in your plate?
Not just food, Kimari, sorry to intervene. It's basically everything.
Okay.
Just determine what experience you want for your guests and see if you're able to meet that within the budget, the money you have. If not that, you'll have to sort of downgrade or upgrade.
I'm feeling as if the 3 key points here is the quality of your wedding. So let's call it that. So in there is decor, in there is catering. There's the quality of wedding versus numbers versus budget. Because I feel as if these are the 3 things which if one has to change. So if you increase the numbers, you have to increase the budget or reduce the quality, for example.
Yes.
Like one thing will weigh in on the other 2.
Yes.
Right. Still back to catering. Do you therefore have to discuss, for example, serving points? Does that change based on the numbers that you serve? Or I'm sure there's something like vendors. Do vendors have to be considered in the numbers conversation, Agi?
Yes, it changes actually because of course you want efficient service. You don't want people queuing on ends. You know, you don't want to during the ceremony, the afternoon ceremony or reception. Basically, you have a program. You don't want the eating program chewing into the rest of the afternoon. That by the time you're welcoming the bride, we're still at the queue point looking for food. And remember, people are hungry. No one is going to leave their plate of food out there to come and dance for the bride. So that's how you counter that is you need to have enough serving stations to accommodate the number of guests. For example, if you have personally, as what we do is for every 100 guests, we do a station. And the station can serve 2 ways. So that means efficiency. Within a very short time, even as a couple are taking their photos, you're done serving the guests and guests have eaten.
That is high efficiency. Wait, that's pretty much a serving point for every 50 guests.
Yes.
Because if one serving point is two-way,
Yes.
okay, but Agi, your standard is very high. I don't know if there's any caterer who offers that number of serving points at a wedding. So maybe if you could tell us the bare minimum, what would be the bare minimum be for numbers per serving point?
No, I don't want to look at it from where you're approaching that question. Because you're approaching the question from a wrong perspective.
Okay.
Yes. Let's not look at it as in a bare minimum because people cut corners.
Okay, okay.
People reduce the serving stations because those are chafing dishes. If you're hiring, that's a higher cost. The spirit that you're using, the number of personnel, for example, to have. So it is, we sort of like got so used to having queues and having bad service at stations that now shows somebody who is doing it. I'm not saying we're doing it right, and we're yet.
Oh, I'm saying you're doing it right. You may not say it, but I'm saying it. You're doing it very well.
Yeah, but you know, there's always room for improvement. And at the end of the day, instead of looking at what is the bare minimum, how comfortable can we even get more comfortable than that? You know, as opposed to saying, let's tone it down. I've been in situations where I'm requesting for a certain number of serving points, and they are denied to me because of the budget of the tent, for example. So my recommendation is I want 4 serving stations. Every station has its quantity of tables, table linen, maybe a tent, maybe I need a wider tent, which means a wider tent is more expensive than a narrower one. So now when somebody goes back to, what can we save? The first one to be struck out is that service tent. Yet they're not thinking that how that affects in terms of the service, the time, the disorganization, and all that. But because we, as an industry previously, we had been used to surviving through that, then that's why maybe you'd want to say, I'm standing out, doing the enough or more.
But I still want
stations.
to push back a little bit. What should be the industry standard?
Maybe I can help.
Yeah.
I think. Oh, sorry. I think. Okay. Obviously, as you're saying, Agnes looks for excellence and to give the couple the experience they're hoping for. But in the event, the limitations of that is not. I think 100 per food station is still fair, but maybe assisted to move it faster. Yeah, so that in lieu of having 2 people going at the same time, because obviously that also, as Agnes said, it also has another weighing cost because of there's still staff crew that is replenishing this food. Maybe 100, but assisted by crew per food. So if you have 400 people, at least 4 stations. For every 100, okay, Agi has set a higher limit of, let's say 50, but I think 100 is fair, and maybe Dorothy, you can add on to that.
Maybe that's where now I ask Kimari as an MC, how much time do we need to feed our guests? We can look at it that way.
Yes.
Are you giving me 45 minutes to feed my guests? If I have 1 service points for 300 people, will I be able to feed my guests within 45 minutes? That is not possible. Most of the time, our MCs give us 1 hour to feed people, maximum. Anything more than 1 hour, And Shiro can tell you, because she's also a planner like me, and you're an MC, anything more than 1 hour is too much. So within 1 hour, how can we handle it? How can we feed 1,000 people within 1 hour? How do we feed 2,000 people? Because we do weddings for 2,000 people. How do we feed 2,000 people within 1 hour? I think that's another also way to look at it in terms of
That's a
efficiency.
fantastic way of looking at it. I think for me, how I look at it is the time that, if we were to look at the clock when we're inviting the first table to serve, or if maybe it's not table service, maybe it's just, people arrive, queue, and start serving. So the first person to be served on the clock should not be, the last person to be served should not be served more than 45 minutes after the first. That it shouldn't take more than 45 minutes. So then I guess I'll throw it back to the experts. Then how much time would we take to serve 45 guests with one serving point? 45 minutes with one. Is this question clear?
It goes back to
3
the numbers.
hours.
Yes.
The more the numbers, obviously it takes longer. And forget, it's not just that 45 minutes on an hour, is not just the serving time. It's also the eating time. Because nobody's going to wake up and leave their plate on the table to go and dance for the bride. The moment we start
there's
eating,
that
by the way,
too.
There's that as well.
So I think that's why we usually say 1 hour, because the 45 minutes is at least to make sure everybody has been served. And then the other 15 minutes is to allow for the last table. And from my experience, I have found that 100, like Shiro has said, 100 is a fair number. If you really stretch it because of budget, maybe 150. But past 150, what I feel couples end up compromising is the experience of their guests. People come to a wedding with goodwill. And when they end up standing in a queue or sitting down for too long waiting to be served, ile psyche yenye inakujanga kwa harusi inaanza kushuka. Oh, sorry. There are guys who perhaps are watching us from and may not understand Kiswahili, but the energy reduces. It's not what it would have been had they been served quickly. Dorothy, I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about what other elements are affected with numbers, but after Shiro answers that same question with regards to decor and setup. So Agi has given us a good guide on how numbers affect catering. But how about decor and setup? How is that affected by numbers? And what should couples consider when they approach a decorator or a decorator to discuss with them setup versus numbers?
Okay. So setup versus numbers. So the more the people, the more the budget. Yeah. So embrace yourself for impact. Because if you had, let's say, if you start off thinking you'll need 200, you'll invent 200, then you double your number. It means that you've doubled the chairs, double the tables, double the tent. So you embrace your impact. Actually, one thing that I tell my brides and grooms is that maybe think of the highest number. It's better to work reducing than to keep adding, because adding frustrates everybody. Yes, everybody. So, and by the way, big weddings are good. It's just that you need to have your mind around the fact that a big wedding will take a lot from you, not only financially and everything put together. So yeah, so the decor bit is I'm losing my train of thought. The decor is definitely highly influenced, the cost wise. Yeah. By the numbers. So for instance, if you want a very elaborate, very boutique type, replicating that per the guest, the more it tends to now weigh you more. However, if you can afford it, it can still be done. Yeah, because I feel like sometimes maybe we are beating down on big weddings because there are people with big families and it's good. It's just that you need to embrace yourself that big numbers equals to big budgets and big outputs from the couple.
So what items, for example, are directly influenced by numbers with regards to decor? And I mean, a challenge I have found, we who have been in the industry for a while, have is the very simple stuff. We tend to overlook it, yet that very simple stuff could be very crucial for the bride, because she's never done this before. We've done this 100 times over, but she's not done this before at all. So I want you to be very basic.
Very basic.
Yes.
Okay, so now numbers is basic, as in from chairs. So supposing you set up for and as we say, sometimes people manipulate setups and food to fit a number that they want to spend, but they know there'll be more guests. So you set up for 500, but you have 700. It means there are people who will be standing. So therefore, your setup will not necessarily look nice, or there are people sitting on the grass if you're lucky, if it's in a garden. But if it's in a ballroom, then that's also another problem, as we had earlier. So from the chairs to the tables to even the flowers on those tables, every single detail is impacted by the people coming. For every 10 people before COVID is a table, because generally we used to sit 10. Now it's 6 to, so it's even getting worse. So, and then for every table that you increase, it also increases the size of the tent that you're in. So there's not a place that is not affected. Even the cake that you will serve, the more the people, the more slices you will need, so it will increase that. And also sometimes the more the people, you find that you now start to elevate the couple, because now it's become such a huge production that if we sat the couple in a lower position, we won't know where the bride is. So even now the decor becomes a bit more elaborate, because we need to put them on a stage. Sometimes we need to light up that space so we know which direction that the bride is. And or if you're not in the mega domes and the A-frames, then it increases on the alpines and the B lines. So you find that it's a huge setup that sometimes could take away from the beauty of the little details, but still doable. Yeah.
Okay. How about the ceremony? You've talked about the reception.
Yeah.
That setup was for reception, but how about the ceremony?
Yeah.
Is this affected by numbers?
Absolutely, because if you set up in church for, granted, even go to a big church like All Saints Cathedral, the capacity is what? I think 2,000. Yeah. And then supposing it's a big wedding and you get, so people will be standing. And it takes away from the experience of what I would imagine a bride would anticipate, of people sitting and enjoying the ceremony. And so it's just that anticipate that people will stand up. The setup might be a bit disrupted. As planners, you may be told to look for other looking chairs, like, look for chairs, look for plastic chairs and put them around so that people can sit. Yeah. So, but generally, prepare well for whatever number. If it's 2,000, just embrace the number, look at it, knowing very well that you could very well turn your vision of what you're hoping for slightly off if the budgets don't meet it. But if the budgets meet it, the sky's the limit.
Okay. Let me throw it to you, to the question I had asked. So, and Shiro has already mentioned a few. What other elements of a wedding are affected by numbers? So we've discussed catering, we've discussed setup and decor, but are there any other elements that a couple has to consider when thinking numbers for their wedding?
Yes, of course. Let me start by the fact that from just where Shiro has said, big weddings are not bad. You just need to be prepared for them. It would mean, for example, if you wanted a destination wedding, most destination places don't hold big numbers. So you have to sort of think outside that. So another thing would be cake, because obviously cake for 200 people is not the same cake for 500 people. Sound. Kimari, you're an expert in this. You can, of course, tell us that sound for 100 people, you can't set it up for 500 people. Wedding invitation cards, of course. It would mean then maybe you need to do more invitation cards. Even sometimes the photographer will tell you for him to capture all moments for 1,000 people, he would probably need to add an extra set of photographs. It might not be a significant amount, but it's an amount that needs to be thought of. Venue, of course, sometimes you've picked a venue. You had initially started with 100 people, so the venue is just perfect for 100 people. As we move along, the numbers go up. We have to think of somewhere else as a venue because your numbers...
Parents, with regards to numbers. I know that it can be a very difficult conversation to have with your parents, especially, for example, if you're the one who is funding your wedding. Or the flip, which is if your parents are assisting you in funding the wedding, then they sort of want to dictate the numbers, and yet perhaps the couple wanted an intimate wedding. Or vice versa. The parents are thinking, let's make it small, but you're thinking, no, I have many friends. as you think about the answers to that question, if you have any questions for any one of our panelists here, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I'll be more than happy to address the questions to them. So feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'd like to give a shout out to Wangoi Muirigi for joining us. Thank you very much.
That's my daughter.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Smith Kent, just turn up the volume on your gadget and you should be able to hear us clearly, because our sound expert here tells me everything is good. So just turn up the volume on your gadget and you should be able to hear us clearly. Yes, Mama Wangoi.
Thank you, Wangoi, for joining us.
Oh, how timely. And now you get to advise your daughter how to deal with you when we discuss numbers and parents.
So, numbers and parents. This is a very, very sensitive situation, and it has various sides to it. You find that when parents are helping you with the budget, or perhaps even running the whole budget, it sort of like becomes their wedding. The biggest thing that dictates the size of wedding they're going to have is, first of all, the kind of people they are. The other thing is the budget. And if your parents are able to, they do not want to leave any of their friends out. Parents come from a situation where they're not like us or younger people who will be thinking, I have 5 friends, so my wedding's going to have 5 friends. Parents think beyond themselves. They're thinking families. They're thinking groups. They're thinking the church. They're thinking, as at their age, they have so many branching out. I have a sister who got married in Kisumu, that family in Kisumu. So the numbers are usually too big, especially when parents are the people maybe coming up with the list. What I've experienced is when a couple is financing their wedding, they have a different say. Another thing is when Nairobi couples, let's say like you came from Kisumu and you're here in Nairobi, your folks are in Kisumu, and probably you came from Muranga and your parents are in Muranga. You find that it's very easy to manage that because you dictate the numbers to them. It's your wedding, and you tell them, by the way, I'm sending you a bus that can take 40 people. And I'm sending you a bus that can take 20 people. That's it. That's how they come. We rarely have chaos with the numbers, especially for parents from back in the village. And the couple is taking charge of affairs here.
Well, apart from lawyers. Now, I love lawyers. My wife is lawyer, and therefore I would speak confidently. Numbers is not a problem regardless of where they are. They will hire 2 buses, 3 buses, school buses, and they will bring everybody who needs to be brought here. But proceed. Just wanted to put that disclaimer out there.
Yeah. So what I find is if your parents are in Nairobi, most of their systems are here in Nairobi. If you've gone to school in Nairobi, so you start with your maybe younger, earlier days friends, you've sort of like kept in touch. Your college friends, your work friends, your list is likely to be bigger. And if your parents are in Nairobi, their list is going to be bigger. If they're out there, then it's going to be probably maybe more manageable. But the conversation you have with them is if you're in control of the budget, you can, for lack of a better word, dictate. And tell them, you know what, this is what we can afford, so this is what we are going by. And a lot of parents will respect that. On the flip side, what I've seen is for the young couples, if the parents are paying the bill, the budget, and they can afford it, you cannot dictate that they're not going to invite their friends. Your wedding has so many elderly, as in, you know, their level of people, their seniors, their friends, their families, more than your friends. So, like, I'll give an example of a wedding we did earlier this year. The parents were financing the wedding. So what happened was the guy was given a leeway to invite his younger friends in the evening for the evening party. So he had a very select few during the day. most of the guests who were there in the day were family and friends of the parents. In the night, he got his friends. Interestingly and luckily, a lot of young people do not really get too bothered about church ceremonies and the afternoon thing. They want to just come and party. So it worked well. So it also depends with also where the couple is coming from and where the parents are coming from. Different scenarios, different reactions to numbers. I'll give an interesting example of how many years back. When I got married, 22 years back, my late father-in-law was hosting us at his home. He photocopied our wedding card. Sam, I hope you are hearing this or not hearing this, I'm not sure. He photocopied our wedding card. And he took transport. He ferried people from Gashie. Luckily, it was at his venue and he was cooking. But basically, you can imagine in such a situation what happens, because we had hired the seating arrangements and the tents. Luckily, those days, it was just the usual theater-style seating and tents. And it was in a field. So people sat on the nyasi and all. They had cooked enough food, so it was no big deal. But you can imagine how that was for us, that cards were photocopied. So even years after, you're meeting people and like, I saw you at your wedding. I last saw you at your wedding. You don't even know the person. But because the transport was there and the village is near, Agashi and Karen is distance, not too, So it depends. In terms of the parents, numbers, controlling numbers and dictating numbers, and the couple, it has various sides to it.
I'd like to also hear, thank you very much, Agi. I'd also like to hear from our planners, because you engage directly with the parents in this particular conversation about numbers. How do you balance between the couple and the parents when discussing numbers? I find that perhaps you find yourself in the middle. Dorothy, I see you nodding very. Tell us, how do you manage that conversation?
Kimari, I refuse to be put in a corner. Parents are my friends. They're the ones who give me business. So stop trying to get me into trouble. However, this is how I look at it. From the word go, I like to say, when you decide we are getting married, we are engaged, and you start thinking about it, depending again on the dynamics of the family, you need to start having these conversations with the parents as well, because a lot of clients keep the parents away from the planning, maybe because they can afford to pay for their own wedding, or at some point they know they can go to the parents and the parents will chip in. But I always say, from the word go, please just manage your parents' expectations. Again, depending on the dynamics of the family, that's a very hard thing to discuss because each family has its own way. If I can say, there's a wedding we did for 3 siblings. The first sibling had more than we had planned for. The second one was very strict, and she didn't take, she was like, I don't want a single cent from you people. I'm paying for this wedding, and they were very strict, and they managed to keep less numbers. But then the third sibling thought they would pull what the second sibling put. They were really shocked because now it's like she was paying for what the sister did. So it's really hard to say the best way to deal because each family has its own dynamics. Agi has made it very clear, depending if the parents are paying, depending if the client is paying, depending on what kind of family you have, what kind of friends you have, because sometimes even the couple also have a couple of friends who also determine the numbers. The reality is we are in Africa. There are some people who, of course, are very diaspora, wazungus, and all that. So it's okay them, they are able to keep their numbers a certain, and especially if maybe the groom is a foreigner or the bride, you find they're able to really keep, which is really interesting because there's a wedding we did where the bride was, a foreigner, and we still had 1,400 people. The wazungus were only 10, the rest were from here. So, you can't really say, again, family dynamics. So it's a very hard conversation that needs to be had from the word go. And back again to what I said, please don't bury your head under the sand like an ostrich when you're planning your event. Just start from the word go, accepting the reality that you're living in as a couple, and then that way you can know how you're going to go about things.
Shiro, I'd like to hear from you. Thank you so much, Dorothy. And now I was not putting you in a corner. I was just saying. The truth is, yes, we do have parents who are watching this. Yeah, but we also do have couples watching this, so you are in a tight spot. I see you. See what you're saying. Yeah, Shiro.
What I've seen at the end of the day, the person with the finances tends to rule the day, right? I find you could have a couple that still is able to pay for their wedding, but the parents have attended too many other weddings, and their friends are not being invited to their child's wedding, so they tend to overrule because they can, I will pay. So what we've done in the past, especially if both can pay, sometimes both can pay. If the parents are paying, we surrender to the parents. If the groom is paying and the parents are not able, we surrender to the couple. But if we just sit down with the parents and explain, for us to have an extra 50 people, it looks like this amount. And some parents are good to pay. And at the end of the day, if they're able to pay, then why are we arguing? Let's do it. The only thing is that sometimes a bride could have a different vision, and we were talking about this earlier, where in her romantic setting, it was a wedding of 100, and walking barefoot in a beach, and but now here are the folks who are probably influential people, politicians. You find it's just by default they gravitate a lot of people. So now it's just managing your expectations and understanding this is a family that you're marrying into, and embracing that you're going to have a big wedding. If need be, come back for the anniversary, we'll do a small one. But yeah, embrace the reality that you're in, as Dorothy said, where, just because you're not, don't bury your head down, embrace and love it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes,
I'd
again.
like to add something. I've been in situations where the couple are very clear on what they want to have, and they have their number set out, and everything is as organized as it can be. And the parents call you in for a bahasha under the table, and you are sworn into silence. Cook for more or change the menu from this to that. And so sometimes the parents will come in from the back, especially sometimes they know perhaps the numbers are going higher because of them. They don't want to face the couple because, for example, they've been given a condition or something or a situation, and they'll be told, you invite 100 people, you 100, and between us, 100. So that's 400. And they know clearly, maybe they've shared more cards. So you just find, you just find, Agnes, come to my office, a bahasha under the table, and you're sworn into silence. And interestingly, after the wedding, people never remember to come and ask, how did you feed 600 people and we paid for 400 or something? And where some secrets are kept. But those situations also happen because if there's one thing that parents do not want to imagine is an embarrassment of food running out in their events. Yeah. And so if the moment they realize that could happen, they take charge, whether openly or privately. Those two bahashas could come in. I don't know if bahashas come in for chairs and flowers.
I never thought that envelopes would be given chini ya maji in the wedding space, but wow. I want to take questions from you who's watching us. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and we will be happy to address them to my amazing panel of wedding experts. But before we do, I had mentioned about Elysian Resort. Elysian Resort have been so gracious to host us and to have us here to have these conversations. And I'd like to play a clip about what they can offer you who's getting married. And then from there on, we'll be able to continue with this amazing conversation. I don't know whether we're good with that clip. Founded by the Catholic Diocese of Moranga, Elysian Resort is a beautiful and divinely inspired hotel that expresses peace and perfection. Sitting on 7.5 acres of land off Kiambu Road, Elysian Resort has facilities that welcome both families and corporates alike. Looking to host a conference while still have your guests accommodated all in one place? Elysian Resort's conference and accommodation facilities can host upwards of 200 guests. For the families looking for a place to enjoy a meal and for their children to have fun on the weekend, Elysian Resort has a kids park and a swimming pool and a wide array of delicious cuisine they are known for. Elysian Resort loves to celebrate love,
And so for couples intending to get married, Elysian Resorts Elysian Gardens has a space uniquely designed to host a wedding ceremony and a wedding reception. Whether it's a family outing, an outdoor social event, or an indoor corporate event, Elysian Resort has something for everyone. Elysian Resort is located off Kiambu Road at the junction of the Northern Bypass and Kiambu Road. Karibu Elysian Resort.
Guys, let me just give a little bit more info about Elysian Resort. So beyond the fact that they have been so gracious enough to have us and to host us as we do this show, even the last show that we did, they have an amazing garden that is beautiful for a wedding. And if you're having a wedding during the weekday, they have an even prettier garden next to the poolside where you can do your wedding. And there's the benefit of getting your venue catering to your. There's the benefit of having your wedding. Are we good, Teddy? Okay, let me borrow your mic just a second. There's the benefit of having your wedding in the same place where you will have your wedding venue also providing for you food, for example. So that is one space that you will have sorted by coming here to Elysian. So please consider hosting your wedding here at Elysian Resort. Check them out. I think all the details are in that video, but of course we'll leave the details also in the description here below. There's a lady here called Judy who says that this conversation is extremely informative and has been useful to her. One of the questions she had asked, like I mentioned during the break, is with regards to evening weddings versus daytime weddings, or like I like to call it, dinner receptions versus lunch receptions. I would like to hear your thoughts on the same. Maybe I could begin with you, Ishu.
So with dinner and lunch, if you're hoping to reduce your numbers, the dinners always have less people. You find that if you do the RSVP, not too many people want to be late. So that helps control numbers, and Dorothy will help me with that. Lunch receptions would definitely help increase in numbers. So now, in terms of preference, it's really up to you as a bride or as a couple in the experience that you want your guest to feel. I'm sure even for Agi, there's what she can cook for dinner and what she can do for lunch. So it's an experience that you'd want your guest to experience. But in terms of numbers, if you want to keep your numbers low, have a night wedding. You get a lot of people drop off, and you can help me.
Yeah, so I just want to say, I would say it's a bit 50-50, back again to family dynamics. Of course, if it's an evening wedding and people are coming from Kisumu, Kitui, it might not be, it might not be a good idea, because because most of the time the evening weddings and I think the formal part ends at about 10 o'clock. So it means 10 o'clock people have to travel back, vis-a-vis an event ending at 6 o'clock. Then people start traveling back. So that might help a little bit with the numbers, but again, back to family dynamics.
Let me ride on that same question, but I'll change the setting a little bit. Local weddings, and by that I mean within Nairobi, for example, versus destination weddings. That, with respect to numbers, if you could guide, does that help in managing the numbers, or does the number increase? I don't know. Go ahead.
I think destination weddings, first of all, you need better planning. You need to accommodate people, which is never there with the day weddings. If I was to do a destination wedding, I would look at a situation where everybody is going to stay at the venue. And I would look at, can people afford the accommodation at the venue, and will these people afford all the meals other than the main meal that I was going to give them? There's your breakfast the following day. There's probably the dinner the day before, or maybe you can organize for a basic dinner for your guest. Yeah. Because then if I'm having a night wedding, I'm not just looking at losing people at 10 p.m. I want to party all night, till the last man drops, but I don't want to be on the dance floor by myself at 1 and all the guests are gone. So I'd want to look at how to balance that equation in a way that I'm at the bush, I'm at Amboseli, all my guests are there, nobody is leaving, nobody's looking at their clock, and then we party.
Maybe I can add to the destination. Is it Naivasha? People can drive and come back. So that's not really saving anything. Is it Mombasa? Then people have to take flights, SGR, look for accommodation, like she says. And most of the time when people are doing like Mombasa, Watamu, Lamu, they're looking at experience whereby people can be there from Wednesday maybe to Sunday. So not many people will afford probably that. Again, back to family dynamics. You'd be shocked. I remember the first ever destination wedding. It was in Diani, and the first, I remember just getting into the hotel lobby, and half the guests were in the same flight as I was. So I was like, okay. So they ended up, they had, I think, planned for 150 people. They ended up having 300, which even the hotel could not manage to sustain because of the size of the hotel. So again, back to family dynamics, you'd be shocked that you have many cousins and people who are willing to do that. But most of the time, Mombasa, Watamu, Amboseli, those kinds of destinations, you will not have those 1,000 numbers. But Naivasha, Nakuru, you could probably have. So it depends on which destination again.
And also destination could mean that I'm from Nyahururu and I take it to Nyahururu.
Oh, yeah.
So we are back to square one.
Yeah.
So destination is,
Where?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a shout out here from Kemani Manyeki. Always a pleasure to hear the team, and especially Shiro from Magnolia. I know her for the exquisite work she does in making weddings beautiful. Yes. Then Judy Mwende, we're here for you, by the way. The reason why we're having these conversations is because we want to take your questions. And by the way, feel free to reach out to any one of these ladies even after the show. I've already given you their handles, and I will repeat the handles towards the end of the show. But she has another question that I think perhaps I'd like to throw to you, Shiro. Should you plan to have enough seating for all your guests at the ceremony? And the assumption here is that not everybody comes to the wedding ceremony. And I'm guessing this does, in a way, affect budget, because then you don't, for a wedding of 400, you don't need 400 chairs. Or do you?
Okay. From our experience is that depending on your ceremony time, you could have everybody there. Suppose, like if the bride is walking down the aisle at 9:30, 10, there's a possibility 50% will show up. But if she's walking down the aisle at noon, at lunchtime, she will have all her guests there because they'll be ready for lunch. So I would, depending on the walking down the aisle time, to the in relation to how early is how you, that's when you'd reduce the chairs. I don't know if I've answered. That's how I see it working well.
So if your wedding starts, the later your wedding starts, the higher the chances that you'll have 100% attendance.
Correct.
What if your wedding is in a church? And I know this is slightly outside topic, but now that this question has been asked, what if your wedding is in a church? Does that change the numbers that would attend at church?
Okay.
So for example, a Catholic wedding.
Her question was the setting up of the chair. So we are hoping the church has sorted that out. So we're not worried.
Yes, but I'm still just thinking about the numbers.
All said and done, across the board, whether they are working in church or in a garden wedding, the earlier you start, the less the numbers. Actually, we've had times where the bride has been there and we're waiting for quorum because there's not enough quorum for her to walk down the aisle. So the earlier, the less the guests. The closer to lunch or the evening, then full attendance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Your parting shots. And by parting shots here, I mean we've discussed a lot. And if there was one specific item you would want your, someone who's planning a wedding to remember, and I'm going to begin with you, Shiro.
Are you serious?
If there was that one item that you would want the couple who's watching this video to remember and to take home, what would that one item be?
Okay. As I said last week when we met up, is that a beautiful wedding and a fantastic everything coordinated wedding is good, but a beautiful marriage is even better. So allow yourself to enjoy the process of planning your wedding. Accept the reality that you're in. If money allows, then do what your money allows. If it doesn't, manage your expectation and enjoy the process so that you start your forever after on a happy note. Yeah.
Thank you, Shiro. Agi?
To the couple that is looking forward to getting married this year or in the very near future, your wedding is your unique wedding. Think about your wedding as your own event. Identify your likes and dislikes, and do not copy paste. So at the end of the day, even though you've seen our work, for example, out there at so and so's wedding, you could avoid to come and say, let's copy what you did there, here, and be creative with your own event. The event is yours. Then there's another thing that we assume that there's a standard way the Kenyan wedding food should be. Be that different couple who is ready to try out new things. We like the challenges. We want to work with you to give you something different. Thank you.
Thank you, Agi. Dorothy?
So first of all, maybe before I say my parting shot is in terms of numbers, when you're planning for them, please include children if they are expected to attend, because they also, you'd be shocked, and you'd be shocked that actually your wedding could have 50 children, and that takes up a very big amount, and they need somewhere to sit, they need to be entertained, they need food. So when you're planning your numbers, if you're expecting any children from the family or friends, and if possible, even their nannies, especially if they are those small children, consider it. If you're not doing an adults-only reception, just consider children to be part of your guest list. I'll just...
if you could also just, on the same point, and I think we had mentioned it, but we didn't discuss it, vendors. You've talked about children. If you could also just elaborate a little bit more on vendors.
I'll just elaborate. I know this vendor discussion is always online, and I just laugh because I'm one of those planners who advocate for my vendors to be fed. I've worked with Agi, I've worked with Kimari. I advocate for my vendors to be fed because there are some people who can't leave the venue to go and eat. It's just a reality.
First, like I said, let's do the basics first. So my question, let's elaborate a little bit more. By that I mean, vendors are the people who've come to serve you at your wedding. That's your MC, photographer, cinematographer, wedding planner, the team that has decorated your wedding, the team that is catering at your wedding. I presume they should also be counted in. Although in this case, I don't know, Agi.
We take care of our team.
Right. Yeah. Now, all these people are the vendors I'm talking about. And the question that I'm asking Dorothy, and I'd like to hear your comments on the same, is should you feed the people who are coming to serve you at your wedding, or perhaps not? Because the flip side, and that's why it's a hot debate, especially in the industry, is that I have paid you to come and work, not to come and eat at my wedding. So if you could now continue to elaborate on that. And then Agi, I'd like you to speak on the same, but with regards to hotels, because in a hotel, the price per plate is maybe 3,000.
Maybe that Dorothy can do.
Okay.
Yeah, for the hotel.
So and that's why actually I was saying that, of course, when we sit down, I always insist there are people, because let's start with photographers. They start with you sometimes as early as 6 a.m. in the morning. And they're expected to capture the full day without any break. So it would mean either they've carried takeaway or they've sent somebody for takeaway. Another group, it's not all vendors that have, like for example, the way Kimari is saying, there's decorators, they set up. People set up and go. Tents come, they are set up and go. I have tents. I do not expect my team of tents of 25 people to be fed. But there are some basic vendors who I say are always important to be included in the guest list. Photographer, videographers, the person who's bringing the cake and who has to sit through all that until the cake is cut, MC, DJ, the people who have to be there when the wedding is taking place, who cannot probably have the opportunity to leave. You have to consider them. Now, Of course, I understand that sometimes for hotels, it's very tricky because I know even there are some caterers, and sometimes a gig may have even a budget of, if you're giving people seafood and things like that, a budget of per plate could even go up to 6,000, 7,000. So do you expect the vendors? Please have the discussion with the hotels. I am sure they can give, I've been in situation whereby we've been given a more affordable menu because the vendor is not expected to sit, start with a soup, go to the salads, then they just want a basic meal for them to get full. So most of the time, unless it's just a fussy vendor, and they're there, Shiro can tell you, there's some vendors who will say, I need a table for my guest, and it has happened to us, and we have to have those conversations with them. But most vendors who need to eat are just okay to even have rice and stew and soda, and as long as they are fed for the day, because people have to run on some energy, on something. People can't starve the whole day. So just consider, these hotels actually are open to such conversations whereby you're like, okay, what can you give us a discount? And they give you, and they'll tell you, vendors will not sit here, we can give you somewhere else where the vendors can go eat. And most vendors are okay with that as long as they are fed. I'm not saying you have to consider 50 vendors. There are just a few of them, basic minimum, who have to be fed.
Thank you. I know we've digressed because you're about to give your parting shot. Usisahau.
Yes.
There's a question that Kemani Manyaki has asked, which is, does your sound system is your sound system affected by the number of people who are coming to your wedding? And I think perhaps I could answer that also, seeing as this is sort of my space. Yeah. So yes. And to Kimani's point, because he's also mentioned how a lot of times people will focus on the beauty of the wedding, but not they don't think of sound and how sound can affect the experience at the wedding. And you're very right, Kimani. You definitely need to think about the sound that is going to be coming to your wedding. Let me put it in a different way, hopefully to pass the point. If you've been to a wedding where you could barely hear the person seated next to you when having a conversation with them, then chances are the sound that has been brought is not being well regulated. And more often than not, what happens with bigger weddings is that, unfortunately, the corners that we had talked about, the corners being cut, is that this particular sound provider put all the speakers at the front, next to the couple, because they're the ones who are paying for the event. Anyway, they should feel the depth of sound. But then the people seated at the end of the wedding setup can't hear much. And then what has to happen is that they have to increase the volume up so that it can reach the guys at the back, but then the guys at the front suffer because it's too loud for them who are at the front. And the right way then to think about this is to balance the sound throughout the wedding and have speakers everywhere. So of course, the more people you have, the more speakers you need so that you don't have to crank up the volume on any particular speaker and therefore affect the people who are right next to the speaker. Good sound should be enough to immerse you in the music, but not too much that you can't even have a conversation with the person sitting next to you, or you'd go home with a headache because of the intensity of the sound. Thank you for that, Shiro. Parting shot. My apologies.
I'll just pick up from what Shiro said. Let's go back to what I said from the word go. Let us just accept our reality. So if your reality is 500 people, plan around the 500 people. There's always a 10% buffer. That's okay. But if your reality is 500 people, plan around those 500 people. Base your quality of wedding based on those 500 people. Don't plan for 500 people and you're expecting 1,000 people, because then that's just a mess. It just makes everybody look disorganized. Just accept your reality, because today we are specifically discussing numbers. Just accept your reality and just plan around that reality. Shiro has made a very good point. Either way, have a good time, because wedding is, we always say wedding is theirs, marriage is ours. So, I mean, there's that saying, which is just an African, I would say, saying, because that's the reality. Just try and work around that and accept that reality and, pray and accept it, because sometimes that acceptance is the problem, because you are planning for 50 people and then you hear 500 people. Just sometimes accept and plan within that so that we are not all looking disorganized at the end of the day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies, gentlemen, brides, grooms, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to sincerely thank my beautiful panelists from Dorothy of House of Dotty on the Instagram handle. You know what? I'll leave the links here below in the description so you can reach out to them. But that's Dorothy from House of Dotty. The House of Dotty, that's the Dotty. Yeah. And Agnes Mwangi from Ports Delight, Shiro Magirakanu from Magnolia Event Planners. Thank you so very much for joining us. Just shout outs to an amazing makeup artist and my kid sister, Jedida from TJ Makeup Studios. Please check her out. If you're a bride planning for a wedding and you're looking for a makeup artist, please consider her. She does an amazing job. Of course, my business partner, Bem from SixtyOne, their Instagram handle being at SixtyOne Kenya. They offer photography and videography services and of course live coverage, seeing as they've been able to cover this conversation. Check them out on their Instagram handle and consider them for your wedding. And then if you're corporate and you're looking for someone to manage the sound at your at your event, feel free to reach out to Teddy. I will also leave his contacts in the description below because he's the one who's managing our sound and doing a really good job at it. I would like to close by saying that next month, on the 29th of June, the conversation we're going to be having is with regards to your parents. Parents versus your wedding planning, because one way or another, you need to, and we advocate for you to honor your parents as you plan your wedding, actually throughout life. And we would like to advise you how to walk with your parents as you plan your wedding. Some people usually say their wedding, your marriage, that their wedding is for your parents and their marriage is yours. But perhaps there's a way you can balance and have both your parents and yourself be accommodated in the wedding planning process and on the day of the wedding. We're going to be having that conversation. So follow us at Weddy Guru, both here on this channel and on our Instagram handle, so you can be updated when that show comes. And then next week, we're going to be having Emmanuel Gashanja, a pastor, a celebrated wedding pastor, talking to us why you need to do premarital counseling on the day of your wedding. So please follow us so that we can be able to have that conversation with him. I will leave by giving one shout out to TK. Thank you so much for joining us and loving this conversation. Asante Sana, George Kamau, Ports Delight represented. Thank you very much, George. And Mercy Masharia, my kid sister, and also one of our planners at Magnolia Events Planner. Thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate you being here. Let's close by playing one more time a clip from Elysian Resort, who have allowed us to have this show at their beautiful venue. If we could play that clip. But from us, for now, thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Resort is a beautiful and divinely inspired hotel that expresses peace and perfection. Sitting on 7.5 acres of land off Kiambu Road, Elysian Resort has facilities that welcome both families and corporates alike. Looking to host a conference while still have your guests accommodated all in one place? Elysian Resort's conference and accommodation facilities can host upwards of 200 guests. For the families looking for a place to enjoy a meal and for their children to have fun on the weekend, Elysian Resort has a kids park and a swimming pool and a wide array of delicious cuisine they are known for. Elysian Resort loves to celebrate love. And so for couples intending to get married, Elysian Resort's Elysian Gardens has a space uniquely designed to host a wedding ceremony and a wedding reception. Whether it's a family outing, an outdoor social event, or an indoor corporate event, Elysian Resort has something for everyone. Elysian Resort is located off Kiambu Road at the junction of the Northern Bypass and Kiambu Road. Karibu Elysian Resort.